Resuming debate, the honourable member for Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Much, Mr. Speaker, and I wish to notify you that I will be splitting my time with the honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona. You know, before I start off, I just have to say that I am absolutely flabbergasted by the ducking, the weaving, the dodging, and the deflection I have seen from the member for Winnipeg North. I'm also flabbergasted because I am the father of 4-year-old twin daughters who know that when they break a promise, they say, "I'm sorry." And what I've witnessed today is that I have 4-year-olds that have more sense and more respect than the government of Canada. And that is a shameful thing. Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by just repeating again, because I think I just can't say this enough, and neither can any of us, going over the Liberal broken promises. The fact is that in June of 2015, the Prime Minister made an explicit promise to Canadians that 2015 would be the last election conducted under the first-past-the-post voting system, and that a bill would be presented to this House within 18 months of forming government. This was repeated in December, when a commitment was made in the throne speech, Mr. Speaker, probably one of the most sacred speeches outlining a government's plans for the nation. And to make sure that every vote counts, the government will undertake consultations on electoral reform and will take action to ensure that 2015 will again be the last federal election conducted under first-past-the-post. And then, Mr. Speaker, I checked the Liberal.ca website, and I'm not sure if it's changed, but as of 11:30 a.m. this morning, it still says we are committed to ensuring that 2015 will be the last federal election conducted under first-past-the-post. It's still up there. So, Mr. Speaker, I also had time to look at the new mandate letter to the new Minister of Democratic Institutions. And, you know, the Prime Minister had the audacity in the opening lines of that letter to say that we promise Canadians real change in both what we do and how we do it. And it goes on to say, I made a personal commitment to bring new leadership and a new tone to Ottawa. And then we get to the crux of the letter. Changing electoral reform will not be in your mandate. Well, Mr. Speaker, it just makes a mockery of the Prime Minister's word, an absolute mockery. And the new minister actually made a call to my friend from Skeena Bulkley Valley, called him into the office, I believe, the day before the announcement was made. And everything looked like it was still on course. And then we get presented with a political deception of the highest order when that news is broken, and I think the sense of betrayal that we felt from that was really profound. You know, we have a Prime Minister who obviously broke a promise, who obviously misled Canadians and this House, who didn't tell the truth. There are Canadians who have a word to describe such a person. We can't use it in this House, but trust me, from the correspondence I've received from my constituents and from people across the country, that word is being used a lot out in the public. I want to read into the record, Mr. Speaker, some of the correspondence I have received from some of my constituents, and I'll start with this quote. I was really upset when I heard the PM say no to change in electoral reform. I guess, putting it politely, I was actually furious. All that work from the Electoral Reform Committee seemingly for nothing. Another quote, Mr. Speaker, I'm appalled that the Prime Minister has abdicated his promise to make 2015 the last election under first-past-the-post. Thousands of Vancouver Island citizens spoke up at public consultations, canvassed voters, researched the issue, and wrote letters to the editor. We all wanted a form of proportional representation, and we weren't alone. It goes on. Other quotes. These were copies that my office received in letters sent to the Prime Minister when they wrote to him saying, your failure to keep this commitment is a betrayal to the many voters who were counting on you to fix our broken voting system. And other quotes, Canadians need to feel included and represented in their politics, and if you choose not to include this in your mandate, you and the Liberal Party of Canada will be further alienating this and other groups which feel unrepresented by political parties of Canada. Please do not make this mistake. Mr. Speaker, all of us on this side of the House, and I'm sure many of my Liberal colleagues are as well, are getting correspondence like this. Canadians are profoundly disappointed about this, and it just makes us question whether the word, because a promise was made so black and white, like what is the word of this Prime Minister worth anymore? How can we trust him on other fundamental issues like the great social change we need to see, the social contract with our veterans, how we look after our seniors, what we're going to do with the retirement age? Because he keeps on referring us to the Liberal website, and there's still promises up there which he doesn't intend to keep. I also want to make mention of the fact, Mr. Speaker, that we have an online petition which I believe 2 weeks ago was sitting at about 6,000 signatures, and it has now surpassed the 92,000 signature mark. This petition is well on its way to making history, of having one of the most, it is making history right now. Now, with my friend from Skinnabaltay Valley, I was honored to substitute on the Electoral Reform Committee while it was doing its cross-country tour. I sat on it for the Atlantic Canada tour, and you know, I was really impressed with the correspondence we received while we were on that committee, the feedback from experts and from Atlantic Canadians. And you know, I remember specifically when I was in Prince Edward Island in Charlottetown, and we had the former commissioner who was responsible for the previous plebiscite in Prince Edward Island, and he warned the committee to beware of the vested interests. Vested interests who want to see the present system maintained because it benefits them. And he told the story of how when the recommendation came out in Prince Edward Island to go to a proportional system, and both the Liberal and the Conservative Party of that province realized that it might upset their hold on to power, they both secretly campaigned against it in the church basements and community halls of that province. So they deliberately undermined the work of that important committee. And as we have heard time and time again, nearly 90% of the experts and 80% of the members of the public that testified called on this government to implement a proportional representation system. Now, the other side, in addition to all the deflection that they've been promoting in this House, have also tried to set up a straw man argument. I think the Prime Minister during a question period once said that a proportional system would give rise to alt-right parties and dangerous fringe elements in this House, while conveniently forgetting the fact that the first-past-the-post system of the United States just elected Donald Trump. So I think that, yes, there could be fringe elements that would be elected, but I tend to believe that the best disinfectant for those kind of policies is sunshine. Bring them into this House, make them defend their ideas, and we, on the moderate side of the House, will just as quickly knock them down. So, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I will just say this, that I think that when Canadians vote, they should expect to have every vote count equally. And our present system is nowhere close to that. We have a system which allows 39% of the electorate to give a party 100% of the power. Make no mistake, when you have a majority government in this House, it is essentially an elected dictatorship. And the fact that 39% of the Canadians who voted should get to have sway over so much of our policy is profoundly undemocratic. We need to encourage more participation, a broadening of support, of participation in this country, not lessen it. And I think this was a golden opportunity that was missed by the government. And I will end on this, Mr. Speaker. You know, respect and trust in politics are finite resources. They're very finite, and they can be used up really quickly. But cynicism can be like a cancer. And if unchecked, it can grow exponentially. And I think the Prime Minister's actions from last week, and indeed the continuing ability of this Liberal Party to not apologize for their actions, is growing cynicism in this country at an alarming rate. And I'm profoundly saddened by the fact that the Liberal Party, the government, is deflecting and dodging the true essence of our motion today. Why will they not act like adults? Why will they not show the same level of respect that my 4-year-olds have? Admit that they misled this House, that they misled Canadians, and simply apologize. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague on the other side for his comments. I too held a town hall in my riding. I spoke with lots of my constituents, and we had quite a variety of comments that are coming through, whether it be proportional, whether it be any kind of system. But we also had a lot of people who were screaming for national referendum. But one thing that was clear, the majority of people that came through did not want a national referendum. That's what I heard time and time again from the Liberal Party members, from the NDP members that were coming, that were speaking out, from the Green Party. They did not want a national referendum. So what I'm having a problem trying to understand is how, after we gave up the majority on our committee for the first time to do the right thing, we end up with a recommendation that calls for a national referendum. I'd like to know how my colleague across can explain that to me, please.
The honourable member for Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think I need to give my friend a little bit of a lesson on the definition of reaching consensus. And in this place, with 338 members of Parliament, represented by the various different major parties, you sometimes have to drop some provisions in order to work together. The fact of the matter is I was on that committee. It was the Liberals who were holding everything up. And the fact that the NDP and the Conservatives could come together, the Bloc and the Greens could come together and reach an agreement, says something. We made the process work. And again, that member is deflecting from the real issue of this motion, Mr. Speaker. I simply want them to admit they misled Canadians with a fundamentally black and white promise and to apologize. Thank you.
Say sorry.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Speaker, and thank you for this. I thank the member for his speech. The previous intervention was particularly troublesome, Mr. Speaker. The suggestion that the government side give up its majority on a committee and then act with dismay when the committee, which they lack a majority on, doesn't give them exactly what they want or exactly what they were expecting, and that is somehow the committee's fault, since they were given a majority, to not turn around and hand the government back what it would prefer. Really, Mr. Speaker, it takes a particularly special type of arrogance to suggest. I'd like my friend, I'd be interested to hear his comments on just what the committee's work was about and the arrogance with which such a suggestion could be made.
Honourable member for Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate my colleague's question because, having had the honour of sitting on that committee for the short time that I was there for those 4 days, I was really amazed by the passion with which we all got involved, and even ordinary Canadians. I think this was one of those golden moments in Canada's history where so many people got caught up in the possibility of reform. And yes, there were a variety of opinions held on what system would be best for Canada. That's what a democracy is. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, is that we had a committee set up to roughly in proportion reflect the number of votes each of those parties received. A majority of the parties on that committee reached a consensus and had a clear recommendation for this government. That's all that needs to be said.
We have time for a very, very brief question. The honourable member for Hamilton Mountain.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for his informative speech that he gave. One of the things that I understand is that when the committee was formed, they went from coast to coast to coast and did unbelievable hard work, taking time away from the families to listen to many citizens across Canada on this issue. And during that, they found out that nearly 90% of the experts and 80% of the members of the public that testified called on the government to adopt a proportional electoral system. So my question is, the Liberals got 100% of power with only 39% of the people that voted. So does he feel that there's a good consensus, a clear consensus on what people wanted on electoral reform? And does he feel there was a clear consensus on what the people were giving the government the majority?
In 30 seconds or less, the honourable member for Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
In a short answer, Mr. Speaker, yes, absolutely. I do feel that we reach a consensus. The committee's report is extremely detailed and elaborates all of the testimony that we received during that committee. And I feel strongly that the work that was put into that, not only in that committee, but members of Parliament across this chamber who went and took the time to hold town hall meetings, consult with their constituents, what the minister did. So much money and so much effort was put into this venture, and then to just have it end like that, just a real sense of betrayal, Mr. Speaker. I can't say it any better than that. Thank you.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Elmwood Transcona.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.